In the morning, Nastya struggled to get out of bed as she had no work obligations and wanted to rest for as long as possible. However, her stomach began to growl, demanding to be fed. She affectionately stroked her belly and decided it was time to eat. Nastya quickly had breakfast and prepared to visit her parents. She grabbed a bowl of food for her dog, Bulka, and headed outside. The cool autumn wind playfully tangled her hair, making it look like scattered leaves ready to flutter away. Nastya reached the dog's kennel and placed the bowl of food in front of her furry friend, who enthusiastically greeted her. Fighting back tears, she spoke softly to Bulka, reminiscing about how her late brother, Petya, had brought the dog to their family when it was just a puppy. After spending a few moments with Bulka, Nastya composed herself and continued on her way to her parents' house. As she walked down the street, she exchanged greetings with her neighbors, although their sympathetic looks hinted that they knew something was troubling her. Nastya's mind was preoccupied with how she would reveal the truth to her mother, the truth she learned from Vadim's father. It was unimaginable to think that her beloved mother, who she cherished so much, could have done something so hurtful in the pursuit of her own principles. Had her mother sacrificed Nastya's happiness to seek revenge? Lost in her thoughts, Nastya arrived at her parents' home. The house was an impressive red brick building, adorned with shingles, purchased with the money from her late grandmother's house. Her grandmother had been a highly respected doctor and had left behind a substantial inheritance. She knocked on the door, and the sound of footsteps echoed from within. The door swung open, revealing her loved ones eagerly awaiting her arrival. Maria froze for a moment, her eyes filled with concern. She took a seat across from Nastya and mustered up the courage to respond. "Nastya, I understand that you have questions, but I don't want you to get hurt," Maria said softly. "There are things that happened in the past that I've tried to shield you from." Nastya's expression hardened. "I can handle the truth, Mom. I'm tired of feeling like there's a piece of the puzzle missing in my life. I want to know who I really am." Maria took a deep breath and with a pained expression, she began to explain. "Many years ago, before you were born, your father and I faced some difficulties. At that time, we made a decision that we thought was best for everyone involved." Nastya's eyes narrowed as she listened intently. "What decision?" "We decided to adopt you, Nastya. You are not biologically our child," Maria admitted, her voice filled with a mix of guilt and sorrow. Nastya's gaze flickered with a mix of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a hint of anger. "Why? Why didn't you tell me before? We wanted to protect you, Nastya. We didn't want you to feel any different or less loved," Maria explained, her voice trembling. "We were afraid that knowing the truth would make you question your identity and your place in this family." Nastya's voice wavered as she spoke. "But I have a right to know, Mom. Keeping this from me was not fair." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she reached out to hold Nastya's hand. "I'm so sorry, Nastya. I never wanted to hurt you." Nastya pulled her hand away, her face a mix of pain and determination. "I need time to process all of this. I need to figure out who I am now." Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Take all the time you need, Nastya. And know that no matter what, you are and will always be my daughter. Biological or not, our love for you is unwavering." Maria Vladimirovna froze and looked intently at her daughter. She felt the weight of her daughter's words and knew she had deeply hurt her. She took a deep breath and reached out to hold Nastya's hands. "Nastya, I understand why you're feeling angry and betrayed, and I want you to know how deeply sorry I am," Maria said, her voice filled with remorse. "I never intended for any of this to happen. I made choices in the past that were driven by my own pain and desire for revenge, but I see now how it has affected you and Vadim." Nastya shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's not enough, Mom. You can't undo the pain and damage you've caused." Maria's heart ached and she pulled Nastya into a tight embrace. "I know I can never fully make amends for what I've done, but I promise you that I will do everything in my power to make things right. I love you, Nastya, and I never wanted to hurt you. Please give me a chance to earn back your trust." Nastya hesitated for a moment, her anger still palpable. But as she looked into her mother's eyes, she saw genuine remorse and love. With a sigh, she nodded and whispered, "I'll give you a chance, Mom. But it won't be easy." Nastya looked at her mother, trying to comprehend the weight of her words. The pain in Maria Vladimirovna's eyes was raw and evident. Nastya took a deep breath before responding. "Mom, I understand that you've been through heartache," Nastya began, her voice filled with a mix of empathy and frustration. But that doesn't justify what you did. You chose to hurt me and betray Dad without any explanation. I deserve an apology and an explanation, at the very least." Maria Vladimirovna fell to her knees in front of her daughter, her tears flowing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, Nastya. Please forgive me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. At that precise moment, Nastya's father entered the house. He walked into the kitchen and witnessed the heartbreaking scene unfolding before him, his wife on her knees, begging for forgiveness. He quietly approached them, his expression a mix of concern and sadness. "What is happening here?" he asked softly, his voice filled with compassion. Nastya looked up and locked eyes with her father. She struggled to find the right words, overcome by a mix of anger, hurt, and confusion. "Dad, Mom betrayed us. She had an affair with someone else and left us without any explanation." Her father's face paled, and he put a hand on Nastya's shoulder for support. He turned towards Maria Vladimirovna, his voice filled with a mix of disappointment and despair. "Maria, how could you do this? Our family is shattered because of your actions." Maria Vladimirovna continued to cry, her body shaking with grief. "I am truly sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was lost and made a terrible mistake." The room filled with a heavy silence as the weight of the situation hung in the air. The path to healing and forgiveness seemed uncertain, but they knew they had to confront their pain and find a way to rebuild what was broken. Confusion and disbelief filled Maria's eyes as she struggled to make sense of the situation. Nastya's heart raced as she realized her mother was still alive and needed urgent medical attention. "Dad, what did they say?" Nastya asked, her voice trembling with fear. "They're on their way, Nastya," Semyon replied, his voice strained with worry. Nastya brushed her mother's hair away from her face, her hands trembling with anxiety. "Mom, stay with me. Help is coming," she whispered, tears streaming down her own face. Maria's breathing was shallow and weak, but her eyes showed a glimmer of recognition as she looked at her daughter. "Nastya, I'm so sorry," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "Don't talk, Mom. Save your energy," Nastya pleaded, her voice choked with emotion. As they waited for the ambulance to arrive, Nastya held her mother's hand tightly, silently praying for her recovery. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the sound of sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of the paramedics. The paramedics rushed into the room, their faces a mix of urgency and professionalism. They quickly assessed Maria's condition and began administering the necessary medical interventions. Nastya watched with a mixture of hope and fear, desperately wishing for her mother's recovery. As the paramedics worked tirelessly to stabilize Maria, Nastya looked at her father, her eyes pleading for answers. Semyon embraced his daughter, the weight of the situation evident in his eyes. "We'll get through this, Nastya," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Right now, our priority is your mother's health. We'll deal with everything else later." Nastya nodded, her heart heavy with emotions. She prayed that her mother would regain her strength and that their family would find a way to heal from the pain and betrayal that had brought them to this point. "Nastya, bring me my bag," Maria said weakly, her voice filled with pain. Nastya hurriedly retrieved the small bag from the living room and handed it to her mother. Maria rummaged through it and pulled out a few pill bottles. "Here, take these," she said, handing Nastya a couple of pills. "They should help with the pain." Nastya held the pills in her trembling hand, her worry evident in her eyes. "Mom, should we wait for the ambulance? They'll be here soon." Maria nodded, wincing as the pain intensified. "Yes, we should, but these will provide some temporary relief while we wait." Semyon rushed over to the sofa where Maria was lying, his face etched with concern. "Marushya, are you feeling any better?" he asked, gently adjusting the pillow under her head. "My heart. It hurts so much," Maria replied, her voice strained. Just then, the sound of sirens grew louder outside. Nastya's heart raced with hope as the ambulance pulled up to their house. The doctor and nurse quickly entered the premises, their medical bags in tow. Nastya anxiously led them to the kitchen where her mother lay. The doctor immediately went to Maria's side, examining her carefully. Nastya stood by, her hands fidgeting nervously. "She fainted and just regained consciousness," Nastya explained, her voice trembling. The doctor nodded and swiftly took out an electrocardiograph machine. "We'll need to run a cardiogram to assess the situation," he said. "Help your mom undress, please." Nastya nodded, her hands shaking as she unbuttoned Maria's robe and helped expose her chest. The doctor efficiently positioned the electrodes and started the test. After a few tense minutes, the doctor reviewed the cardiogram. His expression grew more serious. "It appears to be a heart attack," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately. Lenachka, go fetch the stretcher." Nastya's heart sank as the reality of the situation sank in. She watched as the nurse hurriedly left the kitchen to retrieve the stretcher, all the while praying for her mother's recovery. As Maria was being loaded into the ambulance, Nastya couldn't stop her tears from flowing. She whispered repeatedly, "Mommy, please stay alive. I've forgiven you for everything," leaning over her mother and whispering into her ear. Maria weakly raised her hand, indicating that she couldn't muster the strength to speak. Semyon approached her, hurriedly planting a kiss on her cheek. "Please get better soon. I can't bear to be without you for long," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. He didn't care what others thought. His love for Marusia was too deep. As the ambulance departed, Nastya approached her father, wrapping her arms around him and pressing her cheek against his. "Daddy, everything will be fine. Don't dwell on negative thoughts. Mom is strong, and she will definitely recover," she reassured him. Her father looked at her, searching for answers. "Daughter, what happened between you two? Why did Mom kneel down in front of you and ask for forgiveness?" Nastya pondered for a moment before responding, "Can I not tell you about it? If Mom wants to, she can explain herself." "Daddy, please don't be upset with Mom. She loves you and me so much," she said as her father gently caressed her cheek. "I'm no longer upset. All right, Nastya, go back home now. Tomorrow, we will visit Mom together," he said, giving her a tender kiss goodbye. Nastya kissed her father in return and turned to head home, a mix of hope and worry filling her heart.